The soft hum of the airplane engines filled the cabin as the passengers of Flight 781 settled into their seats. The sky outside stretched endlessly, a deep blue ocean of air and light. Among the travelers sat Ava, a young woman in her mid-20s, her hair tied neatly back, eyes gazing out the window with the same childlike wonder she'd had since her first flight. Beside her was Ryan, her boyfriend, stylish and confident, scrolling lazily through his phone with one earbud in. The two had been dating for almost a year, and though they appeared to be a perfect couple to the other passengers, tension often simmered between them. Ava was humble, empathetic, and deeply patriotic, while Ryan was ambitious, prideful, and often dismissive of what he didn't understand. As the plane leveled off above the clouds, Ava noticed a glint of sunlight catching something outside. Squinting through the window, her eyes widened. A fighter jet was flying parallel to the commercial plane, slicing effortlessly through the clouds. Her heart skipped a beat. She pressed her hand against the glass, breath catching in awe. It wasn't just a jet. It was one of those sleek, powerful aircraft she'd admired since childhood, piloted by people she deeply respected. To her, fighter pilots weren't just military professionals. They were symbols of courage, discipline, and sacrifice. Without thinking, she lifted her hand in a salute, a small but sincere gesture of respect. Ryan glanced up from his phone, a smirk forming on his lips. "Are you seriously saluting a plane right now?" he said with a mocking laugh. His tone wasn't playful, it was condescending. Ava blinked, her hand still mid-air, feeling the sting of his words. "Ryan, that's not just a plane," she said softly. "That's someone protecting the same sky we're flying through. They deserve respect," Ryan snorted. "Protecting the sky? Come on, Ava. It's just another guy flying a fancy machine. Don't be so dramatic." A few nearby passengers overheard the exchange. Some turned their heads curious while others pretended not to listen. Ava lowered her hand, her cheeks warming, but her eyes didn't leave the window. The fighter jet maintained its course, steady and powerful, a silver silhouette against the bright sky. She wondered if the pilot could see her. Somehow she hoped he could. Ryan leaned back in his seat, shaking his head with a smirk. "You always do this," he muttered, half under his breath. "You make everything emotional." Ava bit her lip. "Maybe because I actually feel something," she replied quietly. The atmosphere between them grew heavy. The seatbelt signs dimmed, and a flight attendant passed by with a soft smile, unaware of the quiet storm brewing in row 17. Ava's mind drifted, not just to the jet outside, but to her father, a retired air mechanic who'd once worked on similar aircraft. She remembered his stories, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the pride he carried for every pilot who took off safely and returned home. Those memories shaped how she saw the world, with gratitude, not arrogance. Outside, the jet dipped slightly, flying closer to the commercial plane, as if acknowledging its presence. Ava's breath caught again. The movement wasn't random. It felt deliberate, almost graceful. Her heart swelled with respect. "He's flying close," she whispered, eyes wide. Ryan rolled his eyes. "Yeah, probably just showing off." But Ava shook her head. "No, that's not showing off. That's precision. That's discipline." Her tone carried quiet admiration, the kind that came from truly understanding something profound. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Ryan chuckled. "You sound like one of those emotional internet posts. Next thing you know, you'll be crying over a jet." Ava didn't reply. She simply stared out the window, her eyes glistening slightly, not out of sadness but pride. "Maybe I would," she whispered, "because some things still mean something to me." Ryan sighed and looked away, muttering something she didn't catch. A middle-aged woman across the aisle gave Ava a small, understanding smile. Ava smiled back faintly, then returned her gaze to the sky. The fighter jet was still there, steady and strong. The sunlight reflected off its wings, creating a halo-like shimmer. Ava couldn't help but wonder who was inside that cockpit. Was it a man or a woman? Were they aware that hundreds of eyes were following them from this passenger plane? She imagined the pilot, calm and focused, scanning instruments, guiding the aircraft through thin layers of air with practiced precision. She imagined them glancing sideways, noticing her. The girl in seat 17A, hand raised in respect. Her mind wandered deeper. If only Ryan could see what I see, she thought. To her, the world wasn't about appearances or status. It was about moments of meaning, like this one where two aircraft shared the same sky, two different lives crossing paths silently. Ryan's phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. He chuckled at a meme on his screen and muttered something under his breath. Ava turned slightly, watching him, realizing how different they were. He was always connected to something, and social media, work, distractions, and while she was connected to feelings, stories, and moments that mattered. The flight attendants began rolling the refreshment cart down the aisle. "Drinks or snacks?" one of them asked cheerfully. Ava smiled politely, but Ryan ordered first, barely looking up. The moment passed quietly, but Ava's attention was still fixed outside. The jet was still there. Then something strange happened. The jet tilted its wings, not a full turn, but a subtle, precise dip, a wing wave. Ava's eyes widened in disbelief. It was a known gesture among pilots, a silent salute or acknowledgment. She gasped softly, "Ryan, did you see that?" He didn't even look. "See what?" "The jet, it just dipped its wings," she said, her voice filled with awe. "That's a pilot's way of saying hello, or showing respect." Ryan finally looked out the window, unimpressed. "You're imagining things, Ava. It's just air turbulence or something." But Ava knew better. Her heart raced, her throat tight with emotion. Maybe it was coincidence, or maybe the pilot had seen her gesture earlier. Maybe, just maybe, he was returning it. For a fleeting second, she thought she could see the pilot's helmet glint through the cockpit glass, a faint movement, like a nod. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered, "Thank you." Ryan rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're embarrassing yourself. It's not like they can hear you." But Ava didn't care anymore. She wasn't doing it for anyone's approval. Not Ryan's, not the passengers. It was her way of saying thank you to those who risk their lives above the clouds, unseen and often unappreciated. The woman across the aisle smiled again, this time with tears in her eyes. She leaned over and said softly, "My husband was a pilot. He would have loved that." Ava's lips parted, surprised. She smiled back warmly. "Then that salute was for him too," she said. Ryan groaned, slumping in his seat. "Oh, great, now you're making friends with strangers." But the woman's eyes softened and she said, "You should be proud of her. Most people forget what it means to show respect." Ava's cheeks flushed, not from embarrassment, but from gratitude. The plane continued its smooth journey, and the jet slowly veered away, ascending toward the golden sunlight. Ava watched until it disappeared completely into the horizon. As the sky turned a deeper shade of amber, Ryan finally broke the silence. "You really take this stuff seriously, huh?" Ava turned to him, her voice calm but firm. "Yes, I do. Because respect costs nothing, but it means everything." He didn't respond right away. For once, he had no sarcastic remark. He just looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her differently for the first time. Outside, the clouds drifted like oceans of gold beneath them, and the sky stretched endless and pure. Ava leaned her head gently against the window, her reflection glowing in the sunlight. In her heart, she carried something simple yet powerful, the belief that kindness and respect still mattered, even at 30,000 feet. She didn't know yet that the story wasn't over, that the fighter jet pilot would soon do something that would leave the entire cabin in stunned silence. The cabin of Flight 781 was unusually quiet now, the previous tension settling into a thick but subtle anticipation. Ava sat back in her seat, her hand slowly lowering from the salute, though her eyes never left the sky. The fighter jet had veered slightly upward, disappearing into the distance, but the memory of the wing dip, the pilot's acknowledgment, lingered in her mind like a vivid echo. She could still feel the rush of pride and awe, a warmth spreading through her chest that had little to do with the sunlight streaming through the window. Ryan, still fuming beside her, folded his arms across his chest and let out an exaggerated sigh. "You really think they noticed you?" he muttered, tone heavy with condescension. Ava's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Her silence spoke louder than words ever could. Around them, a few passengers who had been watching subtly leaned back in their seats, exchanging glances. There was an almost imperceptible shift in the energy of the cabin, a recognition that something meaningful had occurred, even if the observers couldn't quite articulate it. Ava's gaze drifted beyond the disappearing jet, imagining the pilot still at the controls, feeling the rush of wind and the thrill of control, the immense responsibility that came with navigating a fighter jet at those altitudes and speeds. She thought of the countless hours of training, the countless sacrifices, the nights away from family, the focus and precision required to operate such a machine. To her, the salute had been natural, a gesture of acknowledgement and appreciation for someone who risked so much for the safety of others. Ryan's phone buzzed. He glanced down, swiping and laughing at a notification. But even that humor felt hollow now, overshadowed by Ava's quiet dignity. He tried to make light of the situation again. "You're taking this way too seriously. It's a plane, not a person," he said, though his voice carried less conviction than before. Ava, ignoring him, simply continued to watch the sky, lost in her own reflections. The flight attendants began their rounds with the beverage cart, and Ava took a bottle of water, smiling politely at the attendant. Ryan, still trying to regain his composure, muttered under his breath as he took a soda. A few passengers exchanged brief, knowing glances, recognizing the subtle power dynamics playing out in row 17. The girl had demonstrated courage and respect in a confined space where most people remained passive. The boyfriend, by contrast, had been revealed for what he truly was, and dismissive, arrogant, and unwilling to appreciate a moment of genuine significance. Minutes passed, the sunlight outside gradually shifting toward a golden hue as the afternoon wore on. Ava could still feel the adrenaline from the sight of the fighter jet, her heart beating faster as she recalled the precision of the aircraft and the subtle tilt of the wings that had seemed to acknowledge her salute. She wondered if pilots ever realized how profoundly their presence could affect people in ordinary situations. Here she was, an ordinary young woman sitting quietly in an airplane, yet profoundly moved by someone she had never met. Ryan's frustration simmered. He attempted to break the silence, leaning closer and whispering sarcastically, "So, are you going to do this every time you see a plane?" Ava turned her gaze briefly toward him, her eyes calm, unwavering, and full of quiet authority. "I don't salute for attention. I salute because it's the right thing to do," she replied softly but firmly. Ryan's frown deepened, the anger in his eyes giving way to something less tangible, perhaps confusion, or even a flicker of respect he refused to acknowledge. The cabin atmosphere shifted further as the flight attendants moved down the aisle, serving snacks and beverages. Passengers whispered quietly among themselves, their voices hushed yet filled with curiosity and admiration. A man in the row behind whispered to his wife, "That girl has courage. I'd never have the nerve to do that." Ava, though unaware, had already begun to influence the passengers around her, subtly reminding them of the power of integrity and respect. The plane suddenly banked slightly, tilting as it adjusted its course. Through the window, Ava caught a glint in the clouds, another fighter jet, distant but unmistakable, slicing across the sky. Her eyes widened in recognition and awe. Without thinking, she raised her hand again, this time a gentler, more deliberate salute. Ryan's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide. "Seriously, again?" he said, incredulity dripping from every word. But Ava's expression remained serene, almost reverent. "It's not for you," she said softly. "It's for them." The passengers' reactions were mixed. Some leaned forward to catch a better view. Others smiled quietly, sensing the significance of the moment. There was a shared understanding that respect and courage could manifest in small, simple gestures. Gestures that required nothing more than conscience and awareness. For a moment, the plane became a vessel not only in the physical sense but in the moral sense, carrying a lesson of humility and acknowledgement for those who risked everything to protect others. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, realizing that his mockery had failed to diminish the meaning of Ava's gesture. He glanced toward the window, squinting at the distant jet, and for the first time he began to see a fragment of what she felt. There was power in precision, in discipline, in the silent communication between people who shared a vocation and a responsibility he had never understood. His pride, so often his shield, suddenly felt fragile and inadequate. Ava's thoughts wandered. She imagined the pilot glancing sideways, perhaps noticing her salute, perhaps responding in kind. The concept thrilled her. She pictured the pilot momentarily acknowledging her gesture with a subtle wing dip or a nod, a small, silent connection across thousands of feet of airspace. She felt that in this instance civility, respect, and human connection transcended distance, hierarchy, and circumstance. Ryan, attempting to mask his dawning awareness, leaned back, muttering something inaudible. But Ava no longer needed to argue. Her gesture, her feelings, and the silent acknowledgement of the pilot had already spoken louder than any words could. Around them, passengers continued to watch discreetly, many recording the moment on their phones, some whispering to friends, and others simply observing in silent admiration. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of gold and rose, Ava lowered her hand again, but the memory of the jets, their speed, their discipline, and their acknowledgement remained vivid in her mind. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from any sense of victory over Ryan, but from connecting in her own small way with someone whose life was dedicated to something far greater than herself. Ryan finally spoke, his voice quieter, tinged with a reluctant respect he would never admit out loud. Maybe it is kind of impressive, he muttered, glancing at her for the first time with something approaching awe. Ava didn't respond. She only smiled faintly, her eyes returning to the clouds. She had no need for validation. The knowledge of her gesture's sincerity, and the possibility that it had been acknowledged, was enough. Passengers returned to their activities, yet the cabin seemed to hum with a subtle, shared consciousness, a collective understanding that courage and respect could exist even in the smallest of gestures. The flight attendants continued their rounds, offering drinks and snacks, occasionally glancing toward Ava and her window seat, sensing the quiet strength she exuded. Then, something incredible happened. Far in the distance, the second fighter jet executed a precise maneuver, banking slightly, wings glinting in the sunlight. Ava's breath caught. The pilot, it seemed, had noticed her gesture. He had returned it, a silent acknowledgement across the vast expanse of sky. Ava's hand went up once more, a tender, grateful salute. Ryan's jaw tightened, his earlier sarcasm replaced by a mixture of disbelief and unease. He had mocked her, dismissed her, yet now he was confronted with something undeniably extraordinary. A pilot in the sky, responding to a heartfelt gesture he had refused to understand. The cabin fell into a quiet awe. Some passengers whispered, others recorded the moment, and a few simply watched in stunned silence. Ava felt a thrill, a connection across space and duty, and even Ryan begrudgingly could not deny the impact of what he had just witnessed. The pilot's unexpected response had transformed the ordinary flight into a story of respect, courage, and human connection. And yet for Ava, it was not about recognition or applause. It was about honoring bravery, dedication, and the small, meaningful gestures that reminded humanity of its better self, even at 30,000 feet, flying through clouds that caught the golden light of the setting sun. The story wasn't over yet, and neither was the lesson. What would follow next she didn't know, but she was ready. Her heart still raced with anticipation, knowing that sometimes the simplest gestures could ripple outward and touch lives in ways no one could predict. The golden sunlight streaming through the airplane windows had begun to soften, casting long, warm streaks across the cabin of Flight 781. Ava remained seated by the window, her hand still lingering near her chest as if trying to preserve the emotion of the moment. The pilot's wing dip had been brief, but its impact resonated deeply within her. To her, it was more than just a gesture. It was a recognition of courage, sincerity, and human connection that transcended thousands of feet of airspace. She felt a sense of calm triumph, a quiet pride that came not from attention or acknowledgement from her boyfriend, but from understanding that her gesture had been noticed by someone who lived a life defined by precision, discipline, and honor. Ryan, however, remained unsettled. His earlier sarcasm had faded into an awkward silence, replaced by a combination of frustration and begrudging awareness. He shifted in his seat repeatedly, tapping his fingers on the armrest and muttering under his breath. He had mocked Ava, dismissed her feelings, and yet here they were, confronted with a moment of extraordinary significance that he couldn't deny. The contrast between Ava's quiet confidence and his own inability to appreciate the gesture weighed on him heavily. Around them, passengers were increasingly aware of the unusual tension. Some leaned subtly to catch glimpses of the window, others whispered quietly among themselves. The cabin, usually a neutral and mundane space, had transformed into a theater of human emotion, where courage, pride, humility, and ego played out in a tangible, almost cinematic way. Ava's thoughts wandered as she continued to watch the sky. She imagined the pilot, strapped securely in the cockpit, adjusting controls with effortless precision. The small wing dip had been deliberate, calculated, and professional, yet imbued with warmth. The thought that someone so far away had noticed her and returned her salute filled her chest with emotion. She pressed her hand to her heart and whispered softly, "Thank you." She didn't expect Ryan to understand, and he didn't. That didn't matter. Some gestures were meant for the soul, not for validation from others. Ryan, meanwhile, was trying to reclaim a sense of normalcy. He opened his phone, pretending to scroll through emails, but his attention kept drifting back to Ava and the fading fighter jet outside. The smug, dismissive expression he had worn earlier had been replaced by a flicker of doubt. He realized that he had underestimated Ava, and in that moment he felt a twinge of humility, something he rarely experienced. His pride, usually so protective and unwavering, had been pierced not through confrontation or argument, but through simple, heartfelt courage. A flight attendant passed by, offering drinks to the passengers. Ava took a small bottle of water, smiling politely as she did, her demeanor calm and composed. Ryan accepted a soda, his movement stiff, almost reluctant. Around them, the subtle tension was noticeable. Some passengers, previously engrossed in movies or books, glanced toward Ava with curiosity, sensing that she had done something noteworthy. Others whispered quietly to one another, exchanging brief, knowing smiles. There was an unspoken understanding that this was no ordinary flight. As the plane climbed higher, clouds stretching infinitely below, Ava's mind returned to the concept of respect. She thought of the countless pilots who had sacrificed safety, sleep, and sometimes life to protect others. In her eyes, a salute wasn't just a gesture. It was a profound acknowledgment of bravery, discipline, and service. She realized that for her, the act of recognition was not optional. It was a moral instinct, a reflection of values instilled in her from childhood. Ryan, on the other hand, had never learned to appreciate the gravity of such acts. That knowledge had made him blind to the subtle beauty of the moment, until now. The sun dipped lower, painting the clouds in a rich palette of gold, orange, and crimson. Ava lifted her gaze once more, scanning the horizon. A faint glint in the distance caught her attention, and her heart leapt. Another fighter jet had appeared, flying at a slightly different altitude but maintaining visual proximity. Without hesitation, she raised her hand in another salute, deliberate and steady. Her gesture was confident, deliberate, and carried all the emotion she could muster without breaking composure. Ryan's head snapped toward her again, his frown deepening. "Seriously? Another one?" he muttered, disbelief coloring every syllable. Ava turned toward him, her eyes calm yet piercing. "It's not for you, Ryan, it's for them," she said softly. Her words, gentle yet unwavering, struck him more than any argument could. He sat back in his seat, scowling, but unable to counter the quiet authority in her voice. The passengers' attention was now fully drawn. Some whispered excitedly to their neighbors, pointing subtly toward the window. Others discreetly lifted their phones, capturing the surreal scene unfolding above the clouds. It wasn't often that ordinary travelers witnessed moments of genuine human connection in the sky, especially moments that symbolized courage and mutual respect between strangers. Ava's small gestures had transformed the plane into a microcosm of morality and admiration, and the impact rippled quietly among everyone present. Then, something even more remarkable occurred. The second fighter jet executed a precision maneuver, tilting its wings slightly in what could only be interpreted as a return salute. Ava's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. The acknowledgement was clear, deliberate, and unmistakable. Her heart swelled with pride and a sense of validation she could never have imagined experiencing at 30,000 feet. The pilot, unseen and distant, had recognized her respect and had returned it. A rare and extraordinary moment of silent communication between human beings, separated by both space and circumstance. Ryan, witnessing the maneuver, could no longer dismiss the scene. His face shifted from irritation to stunned disbelief. For once, sarcasm failed him. He had mocked her, belittled her gesture, and yet here was undeniable proof that her respect had reached someone who understood its value. His ego, normally so unshakable, felt a quiet tremor. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing that bravery and humility could exist without wealth, status, or bravado, lessons he had rarely been forced to confront in his life. The cabin had fallen into a collective awe. Passengers whispered quietly, some recording the event, some simply staring. their expressions reflecting astonishment, admiration, and reflection. The air was thick with an intangible reverence. Flight attendants continued their rounds, but even they seemed subtly affected by the drama unfolding beside Ava's window seat. What had started as a personal, silent act of respect had now become a shared experience, touching everyone in the immediate vicinity. Ava's chest felt light, her spirit elevated by the profound acknowledgement of her gesture. She realized that the pilot had unknowingly given her a lesson, that respect, sincerity, and courage transcend status, ego, and skepticism. It didn't matter that her boyfriend had laughed or scolded her earlier. The acknowledgement from someone trained to command the skies was far more meaningful. Her hand slowly lowered from the salute, but the emotion remained steady and warm. Ryan, attempting to mask his humility, looked away, muttering something unintelligible under his breath. His pride had been pierced, and though he would not admit it aloud, the experience had unsettled him deeply. For once he realized that some gestures carried weight far beyond appearances, far beyond social status, and far beyond individual ego. Ava, on the other hand, remained serene, confident, and fully aware of the silent impact she had made on the pilot, on the passengers, and on her boyfriend. The flight continued, the sunlight fading gradually into a deep amber glow as the plane moved further west. Ava leaned her head gently against the window, savoring the last remnants of sunlight reflecting off the clouds below. She felt a profound sense of connection to the pilot, to the sky, and to the values she held dear. Ryan remained silent beside her, his previous arrogance tempered by the undeniable reality of what had just occurred. The cabin's energy had shifted subtly but irreversibly. Respect, humility, and courage had asserted themselves in a way that no words could erase. And yet, Ava knew that this was only the beginning. The flight still stretched ahead, and the extraordinary acknowledgement from the pilot had set the stage for something even more remarkable to unfold. The ripple effects of courage and sincerity often went unseen, but in this case, they were about to manifest in a way that would leave the entire cabin, and her boyfriend, completely stunned. The clouds stretched endlessly below, the sky above painted in the fiery hues of sunset. Ava's hand rested lightly on her lap, her eyes soft but alert. She understood something profound, that small heartfelt gestures could ripple outward to touch lives in ways that no one could predict. Her salute had not only reached the pilot, but had also reached the hearts of those sitting around her, including someone she had struggled to influence for months. In the confined space of an airplane cabin, she had turned a simple act of respect into a transformative moment. The story was far from over, and Ava could feel it in the electric anticipation of the cabin. The pilot's acknowledgement had set the tone, and the next moment, she sensed, would define the true impact of courage, humility, and moral clarity, lessons that not everyone could learn easily, but that everyone present would never forget. The cabin of Flight 781 remained suspended in a delicate mix of awe, tension, and unspoken curiosity. The golden glow of the sunset had deepened into a burnished orange, streaking across the clouds below, creating a breathtaking vista through the airplane windows. Ava remained by her window seat, still quietly holding the emotional charge of the pilot's acknowledgement. She felt a subtle exhilaration, but more than that, she felt a profound sense of moral victory. Her heart was calm yet energized, the satisfaction of having demonstrated courage and respect overpowering the earlier tension with Ryan. Her gaze traced the last hints of the fighter jet as it continued its graceful flight path, slowly disappearing into the horizon, leaving a lingering shimmer of silver against the fiery sky. Ryan, however, was visibly struggling with his emotions. He had gone from mockery to silent disbelief, and now a faint mixture of envy and confusion began to show in his posture. His body was tense, shoulders hunched, jaw tight. Every time Ava looked at him, he tried to mask his discomfort with a frustrated frown, but she could see it, a crack in the armor of his ego. This was a man accustomed to control, accustomed to setting the tone in their relationship, and yet in this shared moment of humility and acknowledgement, he was completely unmoored. He shifted in his seat repeatedly, muttering inaudible words, unable to contest the truth that he had underestimated Ava's conviction, her awareness, and her ability to connect with something far greater than themselves. Passengers around them began to engage more noticeably. Some leaned subtly to witness the view from Ava's window, while others whispered to their neighbors, captivated by the rare scene unfolding before them. A young boy near the back pointed excitedly toward the window, tugging at his mother's sleeve, asking questions about the fighter jet. Ava noticed his enthusiasm and smiled softly, her heart warmed by the innocence and curiosity reflected in his eyes. The adults around them seemed similarly affected, some recording the moment, others exchanging glances of quiet admiration. The plane, normally a neutral and transient space, had transformed into a theater of shared emotion, where bravery, humility, and awe intersected in tangible, almost cinematic ways. Ava's mind returned to her reflections on respect and human connection. The pilot's acknowledgment, executed with the precision and professionalism of someone trained to operate a fighter jet, had affirmed what she had always believed. Genuine courage and respect transcend status, appearance, and even physical distance. She pressed her hand lightly against her chest, as if to internalize the validation, and whispered a quiet thank you to the pilot, though she knew he could never hear it. In her heart, that single act of recognition held more weight than any words Ryan could have said, more weight than any applause or acknowledgement from those around her. It was intimate, profound, and irreversible. Ryan attempted to reclaim a sense of control, leaning back and attempting a sarcastic smile. "Well, at least you made a scene for someone, I guess," he muttered, though his tone lacked its usual confidence. Ava's eyes met his, steady and unwavering, her voice calm but firm. "It wasn't a scene, Ryan, it was respect. Something you might not understand, but it doesn't make it any less real." Her words, spoken without malice but with undeniable clarity, cut through the fog of his pride. Around them, passengers shifted subtly, recognizing the quiet moral confrontation unfolding beside them. The flight attendants continued their rounds, moving past the rows with professional composure, though even they seemed momentarily aware of the unusual tension between the couple. Ava accepted a bottle of water, smiling politely, while Ryan took his soda, still scowling but quieter now. The energy of the cabin had shifted. What had begun as a personal moment had rippled outward, affecting everyone in their immediate vicinity. Awe, curiosity, and admiration coexisted alongside the quiet tension of a young man, confronting his own hubris. Ava returned her gaze to the clouds below. Watching them stretch endlessly in soft waves of light and shadow, she imagined the fighter pilot navigating the skies above, a solitary figure commanding an extraordinary machine with precision, skill, and grace. The idea of that responsibility filled her with deep respect. She felt connected not only to the pilot, but to the entire ethos of service and courage embodied in that gesture. Her salute had been simple, her acknowledgment quiet, yet it had bridged a gap between ordinary life and extraordinary courage, reminding everyone, herself included, of the power of moral clarity. Ryan, for his part, was visibly conflicted. He had mocked her, dismissed her, and even scolded her for her heartfelt gesture. Yet the undeniable acknowledgment from the pilot had undone him in ways he did not want to admit. His frown remained, but his eyes betrayed the stirrings of humility. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that some gestures and acts could not be trivialized, ignored, or ridiculed. He shifted uncomfortably, watching Ava with an expression that was somewhere between bewilderment and admiration, though he would never openly admit it. Passengers continued to whisper, exchanging quiet commentary about the scene. Some expressed admiration for Ava's courage. Others marveled at the pilot's acknowledgement, and a few simply watched in awe, recognizing that they had been privileged to witness a rare and extraordinary moment. The cabin had become a microcosm of values and human emotions, where courage, humility, and acknowledgement played out visibly, touching everyone present in subtle but undeniable ways. The sun continued its descent, the sky turning from burnished orange to deeper shades of rose and crimson. Ava pressed her hand once more lightly to her chest, silently reflecting on the significance of the events unfolding. The pilot's acknowledgement, the fleeting recognition, had reinforced the values she cherished: courage, respect, and the quiet power of small gestures that carry great meaning. She felt a profound satisfaction, not from recognition by her boyfriend or anyone else, but from the knowledge that she had acted with integrity, empathy, and awareness. Ryan, attempting to regain composure, let out a long sigh. "You really believe all that? About a plane?" he asked, his voice lower now, less mocking. tinged with a reluctant curiosity. Ava turned toward him, her expression serene but firm. "It's not about the plane. It's about the person piloting it, Ryan. About the courage, the dedication, and the responsibility. And maybe, just maybe, it's about recognizing what's bigger than ourselves." He remained silent for a long moment, the weight of her words settling. For once, sarcasm and mockery held no place. He realized that humility and respect were lessons he had been blind to until now, and that Ava had demonstrated them effortlessly, without needing to boast or argue. The cabin remained quiet, the passengers sensing the subtle moral shift unfolding. Then, the pilot performed one final, deliberate wing tilt, a slow, elegant movement that seemed to echo Ava's earlier salutes. The gesture was unmistakable, precise, and beautiful. Ava's eyes filled with awe once more. She pressed her hand gently to her heart, feeling the profound connection between her acknowledgement and the pilot's response. Ryan watched, unable to deny the sincerity of what had occurred. The acknowledgement was more than a physical gesture. It was a bridge between ordinary and extraordinary, humility and pride, ego and respect. Passengers watched in quiet amazement. Phones emerged discreetly to capture the moment. Whispers of admiration circulated, and a sense of shared experience rippled through the cabin. Ava's simple, heartfelt gestures had transformed the atmosphere, creating a unique memory for everyone present. Even Ryan, who had mocked her at the beginning of the flight, could not escape the impact. The moral clarity, courage, and respect embodied in Ava's actions were undeniable. As the sun dipped further, casting a deep golden glow across the clouds and into the cabin, Ava felt a calm satisfaction. The lesson of respect and acknowledgement had been realized in a profound, unforgettable way. She had acted with integrity, courage, and humility, and in doing so, had not only touched the pilot, but had also shifted the consciousness of everyone around her, including the man who had doubted her. The flight continued, the horizon stretching endlessly. Ava leaned back, her eyes soft but alert, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Ryan remained seated beside her, quiet and contemplative, his pride tempered by the undeniable reality of her courage and the pilot's extraordinary acknowledgement. Around them, the passengers retained a sense of shared awe, quietly savoring the rare and transformative moment that had occurred at 30,000 feet. And Ava, serene and quietly triumphant, knew that the story was far from over, that the pilot's extraordinary acknowledgement had set the stage for an even more remarkable revelation, one that would leave everyone on the flight, including Ryan, completely stunned. The airplane cabin of Flight 781 was now a realm suspended between reality and awe, its usual hum replaced by a quiet, anticipatory tension. The golden glow of the sunset had deepened into a rich amber, streaking across the clouds beneath them and painting the cabin in a warm, almost ethereal light. Ava, sitting by the window, still felt the lingering thrill of the pilot's acknowledgement. Her hand rested lightly on her chest, a subtle reminder of the connection she had forged across thousands of feet of airspace. She exhaled slowly, letting the emotion wash over her without restraint. Pride, respect, admiration, and a quiet triumph mingled seamlessly in her heart. She understood that the significance of her actions went far beyond herself. This small gesture of saluting the fighter jet had created ripples, touching lives in ways she could never fully quantify. Ryan, beside her, had shifted from mocking arrogance to stunned contemplation. His earlier sarcasm and dismissal had vanished, replaced by an uncomfortable humility. He shifted in his seat repeatedly, leaning back, arms crossed, jaw tight, clearly wrestling with the reality that he had misjudged Ava and the profound weight of her gesture. He had mocked her initially, thinking her actions were trivial, childish, or performative. Yet here he sat, confronted with undeniable evidence that her respect had been received, acknowledged, and reciprocated in an extraordinary way by the pilot. He glanced at Ava, noticing the calm composure and quiet pride she carried, and for the first time he saw her differently, as someone whose courage and integrity were unshakable, and whose understanding of honor transcended his own limited perception. Around them, the passengers were quietly absorbed by the events. Some whispered softly to one another. Others captured images and videos on their phones, though most simply observed, fully aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. There was a collective realization in the cabin that they were part of a rare moment, an unspoken lesson on respect, bravery, and the power of sincerity. The usual distractions of a flight and reading, movies, casual chatter had fallen away, replaced by a shared attention toward the profound story unfolding in seat 17A and the sky beyond the window. Ava's gaze remained fixed outside, scanning the fading trails of clouds for any sign of the fighter jet. She imagined the pilot, focused yet aware, navigating at extraordinary speed and altitude, his hands steady on the controls, yet capable of responding to her small, heartfelt gesture with such precision. That acknowledgment had been deliberate, professional, yet imbued with warmth and human connection. She pressed her hand lightly to her chest again, whispering a quiet, reverent thank you, not for herself, but for the values that the gesture represented: courage, dedication, and the recognition of responsibility that extended beyond individual lives. Ryan, attempting to regain some sense of authority in the moment, leaned back and muttered something about coincidence, but even he could not ignore the unmistakable precision of the pilot's wing tilt, nor the collective awe of the passengers. He felt a stir of discomfort, a rare encounter with the limits of his ego. The pride that usually guided his behavior now seemed inadequate, fragile, and exposed. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that not all lessons could be learned through force, dominance, or mockery. Some required humility, observation, and recognition of others' integrity. The cabin's atmosphere remained charged yet calm. Flight attendants continued their rounds, offering drinks and snacks, but the air had changed subtly. Ava's calm composure, Ryan's tension, and the passengers' collective awe created a unique energy. People were witnessing a story unfold that went beyond mere spectacle, a lesson on courage, respect, and the extraordinary impact of small, intentional gestures. Ava, though unaware of the full scope of its effect, had become the emotional and moral center of the flight. Her sincerity had bridged not only distance and altitude, but also the gap between pride and humility. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deeper hues of crimson and violet, the pilot executed one final, deliberate acknowledgment, a slow, elegant bank of the wings, almost ceremonial in its precision. Ava's eyes widened and her breath caught once more. This was not a fleeting moment. It was deliberate, intentional, and unmistakable. The pilot had recognized her salute fully, returning it in a manner that conveyed respect, skill, and human connection. The realization filled her with an overwhelming mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, reverence, and the quiet thrill of being seen and understood, even by a stranger thousands of feet away, living a life entirely devoted to discipline and courage. Ryan could no longer maintain his earlier skepticism. His frown deepened, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, a tacit acknowledgement that Ava had been right. He had witnessed her integrity, the pilot's extraordinary acknowledgement, and the quiet admiration of the passengers. For once words failed him. He simply sat back, absorbing the weight of what had just occurred. The arrogance that had defined him in the early stages of the flight had been tempered, replaced by a begrudging respect he did not yet know how to express. The passengers, fully engaged now, whispered among themselves, some softly exclaiming, "Did you see that?" Others lifted their phones, capturing the breathtaking sight of the jet against the sunset-lit clouds. The scene had become a shared experience, a story that would ripple in memory long after the flight ended. Ava's simple, heartfelt gestures had catalyzed this moment, an extraordinary intersection of humility, courage, and acknowledgement that few had the privilege to witness. Ava, calm yet energized, reflected inwardly on the events. She realized that this experience was about far more than the pilot, the jets, or even her own actions. It was about human connection, respect, and the impact of sincerity. She understood that small intentional gestures could resonate far beyond their immediate context, leaving impressions that endured long after the moment had passed. The acknowledgement from the pilot had validated her respect, not for the sake of recognition, but as a testament to shared values: courage, responsibility, and moral clarity. Ryan, still seated beside her, had not spoken for several minutes. His earlier attempts at sarcasm had been silenced by the undeniable truth of what had transpired. He realized that Ava had not only demonstrated courage and respect, but had also revealed a deeper truth. Integrity and humility often carry a weight that wealth, status, or arrogance cannot match. For once he understood that admiration and respect are earned not through dominance or mockery, but through sincerity and moral clarity. The cabin remained quiet, passengers observing with awe and subtle reverence. Ava's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Ryan's growing discomfort, further emphasizing the power of her actions. She had created a ripple effect, touching the pilot, affecting her boyfriend's perspective, and inspiring the passengers around her. Every gesture, every glance, and every subtle acknowledgement reinforced the extraordinary significance of small acts of respect performed with sincerity and courage. As the airplane continued its smooth journey through the deepening twilight, Ava pressed her hand lightly against her chest once more, silently honoring the pilot, the sky, and the values she held dear. Ryan, glancing briefly at her, seemed to absorb a fraction of the lesson. Humility, respect, and courage can manifest anywhere, even 30,000 feet above the earth. And even in the briefest moments, the fighter jet had disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving only the memory of its precision and acknowledgement. Ava's gaze remained fixed outside, reflecting on the transformative moment she had experienced. She understood that respect, courage, and integrity are forces that ripple silently, connecting strangers, bridging gaps, and teaching lessons that words cannot fully convey. The pilot's acknowledgement had not only validated her gesture, but had also illuminated the profound impact of sincerity and moral clarity in a world often dominated by arrogance and distraction. Ryan, for his part, remained seated, quiet and contemplative, the lesson slowly taking root. He could no longer dismiss Ava or her actions, and though he would not yet admit it aloud, he had been profoundly affected. Ava, serene and quietly triumphant, knew that this flight, this extraordinary, fleeting journey, had revealed something important. The power of courage, respect, and sincerity transcends distance, status, and expectation. And as the cabin settled into a calm rhythm, with the sun finally dipping below the horizon and the clouds bathed in fading crimson and violet, Ava smiled faintly. The moment had been extraordinary, transformative, and unforgettable. The pilot had responded, the passengers had witnessed, and even Ryan had been challenged to reconsider his assumptions. At 30,000 feet, a simple salute had become a lesson in human dignity, courage, and the quiet, enduring power of respect. The flight continued into the twilight, the story of a young woman's courage and a pilot's acknowledgement lingering in the air, a testament to the extraordinary impact of simple, sincere actions.